how are we going to test fire it? And somebody came up with a terrific idea, the eggs. Everybody, they're getting 20 eggs a day. And of course, we collected all the eggs, and there's this egg mountain. And the officer saying, pow, God, you mustn't stand behind it because there's a flame that will cook you to a cinder if you stand behind it. So somewhere in Sinai, I'm sure to this day, there is a big yellow splotch. That's where our law was founded. Okay.
Sukkot for me was a bit of a respite, but the tension generally in the country was unbelievable. There were power outages. There was no. We used to cook on the ovens. The cookers were gas, and we had central gas. These big cylinders, which were delivered periodically. But of course there was nobody to deliver them, so the gas ran out. There were times, of course, after the Erev Shabbat, no gas, we couldn't cook. Minor things when you, in the scale of everything, but when you've got families and little children, very difficult. News was still not good. The plumber from across the road was killed. And there was a lot of tension. People were short-tempered, and arguments would flare up. Don't believe all these stories about everybody pulling together in a war. I was scared I would go into labour in the middle of the night, and I had no one to look after the boys. So somebody told me to go to the K'tzin Ha'ir. There's an army liaison office. They help families with family problems, health problems, and different things. And I was very reluctant to go because I thought, they're going to just think she's a spoilt girl from Chutz La'aretz. But eventually I did go, and they were actually very sympathetic and very helpful, and they told me to register Amichai in a daycare center, which they would pay for 6 months. I wasn't looking for financial handouts, but nevertheless it was very much appreciated and helped me in my daytime arrangements. The greengrocer from across the road, she had 7 or 8 kids, and she said to me, call me day or night, and either I'll come over or my teenage daughter will come over, don't worry. Anyway, eventually, Baruch Hashem, a week after the ceasefire, David got 2 weeks leave. He came home, and I jokingly said to him, okay, I'm going to let you sleep tonight, and tomorrow night I'm going to go and have the baby. And actually, that's what happened. And Friday night, 2 o'clock in the morning, I woke him up, you've had enough sleep, time to go. And a couple of hours later, our beautiful baby daughter was born, and we hadn't decided on a name yet. But we had talked about, we wanted something to do with peace, but we hadn't thought about it. And in the bed next to me was this lovely Taimani girl, and her name was Yona. So Yona, as you know, means a dove, which is a symbol of peace. So when David came in, I said, what do you think of the name Yona? And he said, yeah, great. And so our beautiful daughter has the name Yona, and her birth was broadcast all over Israel, even though David was home. And thank God.
Just lessons learned. I mean, there are many lessons you can learn from this. I can only speak for myself. The first thing is, I think it was George Patton once said that there are 2 types of people in the world, people who've been in the army and people who haven't. And I don't say that in any elitist way, but it is true. When you've been in the army, you look at things very, very differently. To this day, and I do emphasize to this day, I get hana, pleasure from eating off a plate. I get, I won't say pleasure if that's the word, you'll excuse me, but I'm sitting on the toilet. You realise what's important, what isn't important. Your priorities change totally. War it's unthinkable that people can do these things to each other. The sort of weapons that we used and the sights that we saw and the things that we heard, it changes you forever. You're not the same person anymore. I'll give you an example. I mean, it's hard to put this over in words. I'll give you an example. Let's say in the army you do a first aid course. So first aid course, fine, you know, you learn normally, let's say you find a person that they're not breathing. So what do? You give them mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. What do you do if you can't find their mouth? It's important, for instance, if you come across somebody who's lying on the ground and their stomach is open and their intestines are lying next to them, it's important you don't try and stuff the intestines back into the stomach. The same thing with brain tissue. When we learned this stuff, I was a new immigrant from England, and it's interesting. What happens is when people hear these things, they giggle. They giggle because it's so, the image is so horrific that you think, yeah, they could be talking about me. They could be talking about me. Let's say you have 4 positions outside the perimeter. One of them doesn't answer when you call them. So what do? Well, the procedure was that you send out 3 men. And 99 times out of 100 it's because there's a break in the wire, the radio isn't working, or somebody's fallen asleep, whatever. The 100th time is the one that you don't talk about. So you send out 3 men. The first man is there essentially to die, to be shot, blown up, whatever. The second man is there to open fire, to make a noise. The third man has the radio, so that he can report back what is or is not happening. Now, when you're sent out as part of this 3-man group, when you're sent out as the first man, the sheer terror, the sheer fear is something you never ever forget. You realise that in the time it takes me to go from here to here, I could be dead. And you want to scream in fear, you want to run away, you want to be anywhere. You will make any promise to anybody about anything. I just want to stay alive. That type of feeling is I don't know how you put that over to people who haven't been in the army. And I think it's very important that in Chutz La'aretz especially, we remember that there are Israelis who do this every day. They do this every day. There are people in Israel who do things that we couldn't even begin to imagine. And I'll just sum up with, I'll close with one thing that I want to say. In my life, I only ever met 2 people who I would consider tzaddikim, real tzaddikim. One was my downstairs neighbour, Moti. Moti wasn't from, wasn't Dati, he was a house painter. His job in the army at that time was in mine detection. And what he did was he would walk down the road in front of the vehicles looking for mines. And if he discovered a mine, then they would call in the mine guys and take it away. If he made a mistake, well, you can imagine. And I once said to him, it's a volunteer job. I mean, nobody wants to do that. I once said to him, why do you do this? Why did you volunteer? And he said, I'll tell you. He said, somebody like you, he said to me, he said, somebody who's been to university and you can learn Torah, and you know, somebody like you we need. He said, if something happens to me, what's the worst thing that can happen? So it'll be one less house painter. to me, that's a true tzaddik. It's a true tzaddik. And I don't know how else to finish this, but there are some real tzaddikim in Israel. People go through this sort of thing. There's no words to praise them. There's no word to describe them. When this war was over, the 73 war, there were 2,656 people killed. The son of the Makora owner was killed. The son of the plumber was killed. 2 people from our shul were killed. And to the day I left Israel, nobody ever sat in their seat again. Those seats remained empty. A friend of ours I was working with was killed. You lose friends, you lose acquaintances, you lose people. And that's the price that we pay for the state of Israel. And I think it's very important we don't forget that.
Did you take my questions?
Yeah.
The question is to Ruth or David?